Either you pay the rent or you pack your bags and get out, old woman. Those were the exact words. I heard them so clearly, right there in my own living room. It was my only son, David, who said them. And the sting wasn't just in the words themselves, but in the way he spoke them. There was no shouting, no raised voice, which somehow would have been easier to understand, maybe even to forgive. No, his voice was just cold. It was a kind of emotional coldness that went right through me, chilling me to my bones. It felt like I was nothing more than a tenant, a complete stranger, just getting in the way of his plans, taking up space he thought was his. He didn't wait for a reply. He just laid out his demand, a terrible deadline, a countdown to my own humiliation, right there in the home I'd helped build with my own 2 hands. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. I just stood there staring at him, and in his eyes, I didn't see the boy I had raised, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and happy stories. No, what I saw was a man, driven by a kind of hurried impatience I just couldn't grasp. I truly couldn't understand it. Beside him, my daughter-in-law Bethany was there too. She didn't look at me, not really. She pretended to fuss with a cushion on the sofa, straightening it, adjusting it. But her silence, her clear complicity, it hurt. It twisted inside me, almost as much as David's cruel words. They thought I was fragile, you see. They thought I was just some old woman, forgotten by time, someone they could simply cast aside without a second thought, like an old, broken toy. But little did they know that in that crushing silence, my mind was actually working. It was working fast, faster than they could ever imagine. A memory surfaced, a promise, really. It was an old promise made by my late husband, Arthur. And with that promise, a thought of a certain document kept safe, under lock and key, for a very long time. That harsh ultimatum, that cold demand, that wasn't my end, not at all. Oh, they thought it was. They truly believed they were putting an end to me, to my life as I knew it. But they were so wrong. That moment, that terrible demand, it was just the beginning of the end for the life they had so carefully planned for me. They gave me 6 days to leave. 6 days. And I decided right then and there, standing in my own living room, that I would use every single minute of that time, every last one. My name is Eleanor. I am 78 years old. 78. It feels like a lifetime has gone by, and yet, some days, it feels like just yesterday I was a young woman, full of dreams, working away at my sewing machine. That is what I did, you see. I was a seamstress my whole life. Not one of those big fancy designers, no. I was the kind of seamstress who knew each client by name. I knew their sizes, their favorite colors, the way a certain fabric would hang just right on them. I knew the feel of silk, the strength of denim, the comfort of cotton. My hands were always busy, always creating. My Arthur, he called me his thread of life. He was a builder, strong hands, yes, but a kind heart. He was the anchor to my fluttering thread. We were a good pair, Arthur and I. A really good pair. We built that house together. The very house David was just telling me to leave. Brick by brick, we raised it. Every single one of them we touched with our own hands. We bought the plot of land with our lifetime savings, pennies saved here and there, sacrificing a little to gain a lot. And we did. Every wall, every window, every door in that house. It held a piece of our story. Our laughter echoed in those hallways. Our quiet talks filled the kitchen. It was more than just wood and plaster. It was us. It is us. 5 years ago, Arthur passed away. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. When he was gone, the house felt so big and so silent. Terribly, unbearably silent. The sound of my own footsteps was all I heard. The quiet hum of the refrigerator. The house felt empty, even though all our things were still there. That is when my son, David, and his wife, Bethany, offered to move in with me. It seemed like a godsend at the time. "To take care of you, Mom," David said. He looked so sincere. I believed him. I really did. At first, it truly was a relief. The house had the sound of people again. There was laughter sometimes. The smell of fresh food from the stove. It was not my cooking, not always, but it was food being cooked. It brought a little life back into the silence. I felt useful again, you know? Taking care of their clothes, mending a button here, sewing a hem there. And I would make that cornbread. Oh, David loved my cornbread when he was a child. He would gobble it up so fast. I started making it again, just for him. I believed we were a real family again, united under the same roof. A grandmother, her son, and his wife. It felt right. It felt warm. But even then, even when things felt good, there was always something tucked away. Discreetly, I kept an old wooden box. It sits at the back of my wardrobe, right under a pile of old linens I rarely use. Inside it, along with yellowed photos from my wedding day, pictures of a younger, happier Arthur and me, was the deed to the house. It was right there, in my name and Arthur's, plain as day. My husband always told me. He said it so many times, his voice steady, his eyes looking right into mine. "Eleanor, this house is your security. This house is yours. Never forget that." And I never did forget his words. Not truly. Not the words themselves. But a mother's love, it is a powerful thing, you know? Sometimes that love, it makes us believe that our security, our true safety, lies in people, in the warmth of family, in the promises of our children, not in cold, hard papers. I believed in them. I really did. And because I believed in them, I believed in us. I believed in them. I really did. And because I believed in them, I believed in us. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to shift. It wasn't like a sudden storm. No, it was more like the tide going out, little by little, leaving things bare. The change. It was so subtle at first, I almost didn't notice it. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. I remember the dinner table, the one Arthur and I bought when we first got married. It used to be full of chatter, full of stories. But then it became quiet. Whenever I sat down, it was like the conversations just dried up. David, my son, and Bethany, his wife, would be talking and laughing before I came in. But the moment I pulled out my chair, a silence would fall. A heavy, awkward quiet. It was like I was interrupting something, even though it was my home. I'd try to ask about their day or share a little story from my own, but the replies were always short, a mumbled yes or no. The warmth, it just faded away. Then Bethany, she started complaining. Not to me directly, not usually, but loud enough for me to hear. Her voice would carry from the kitchen or the living room. The electricity bill was ridiculous this month, she'd say, and her eyes would flick towards me. Or, this water bill is outrageous. It felt like she was counting every drop I used, every light I left on. And the cornbread? The one I made with so much love, remembering David's childhood appetite? It started to be forgotten, left on the counter, under a cloth, until it went stale. Sometimes I'd find it days later, still there. They started bringing home takeout, just for the two of them. I'd hear the rustle of paper bags, the smell of something new, something I wasn't invited to share. I'd be in the kitchen, making myself a simple slice of toast, and they'd be in the living room, eating their dinner, just the two of them. David, my son, he used to be so good. He'd ask for my blessing every morning before he left for work, a quick kiss on my cheek. But now, he barely said good morning. He'd walk past me as if I were part of the furniture, like a lamp or a chair, just an object taking up space. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me. It was like I was invisible. I remember one day, I had a doctor's appointment scheduled. They had promised to take me, said they'd be right there. And on the day, just an hour before we were supposed to leave, David called out from his bedroom, "Mom, something's come up. An emergency at work. We can't take you today." It felt like a dismissive wave of the hand. No apology, no offer to reschedule. Just an unforeseen emergency. I began to feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, a burden. That's how they made me feel. The house, our home, it no longer felt like mine. It felt like I was imposing. The loneliness, oh, the loneliness within my own home was the cruelest of all. Because I could hear their laughter in the other room. I could hear their voices, light and easy, and know that I wasn't a part of that joy. I was on the outside, looking in the very place I had built. The pain of their indifference. It wasn't a big, bruising blow. It was a fine needle, slowly, slowly piercing me. 1,000 tiny pricks every day. I tried to justify it. You know, I told myself, they're tired. They're stressed with work. Modern life is demanding. But deep down, deep in my bones, I knew something was breaking. The respect, the affection, the gratitude they once showed, everything seemed to be slipping away, like sand through my fingers. It was all giving way to a cold impatience, an impatience with me, with my presence. They were cornering me, I realized, slowly, subtly, without a single shouted word. They were isolating me, cutting me off. They were preparing the ground for something much, much worse. They were cornering me, isolating me, preparing the ground for something much, much worse. And then it finally happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day that felt ordinary, routine. I was in the living room, a place that held so many memories. Every dent in the wooden floor, every faded spot on the rug, it all spoke of our life here, Arthur's and mine, and then David's childhood. I was just dusting my picture frames, the ones on the mantelpiece, each one a little window into the past. My wedding photo, yellowed with time, was in my hands. Arthur's face, younger, beaming. I remember tracing his smile with my thumb, a small comfort. Then the front door opened. David. He was home early from work. I turned, a small smile ready, expecting at least a quick nod, maybe even a word. But he didn't say anything. He just stopped, right in front of me in the middle of the room. His hands went to his hips, a posture I knew, a posture that always meant something serious was coming. And then Bethany appeared right behind him, like a shadow, really. She didn't look at me either. She just stood there, a silent presence. That's when he spoke. And the words, they weren't shouted. There was no anger, no red face, no raised voice. Just a flat, emotionless tone. It was so cold, so measured, almost like he was reading from a script he had rehearsed. "Mom," he started, and my heart tightened a little, a familiar dread forming in my stomach. "We need to talk. Things are tight. Either you start helping with rent, or you'll have to find somewhere else to stay. Old like this, you can't keep being a burden." The world just stopped. It truly fell silent around me. The air left my lungs. The only sound was the word old echoing inside my head. Old. It wasn't a term of endearment, not coming from him. It was an insult, a way to shrink me, to diminish me, to turn me into a problem, a weight, a burden. My own son, my David. I looked down at the wedding photo still clutched in my hands, at Arthur's smiling face looking up at me, and I felt a burning shame. A shame that wasn't mine, but was laid upon me, heavy and suffocating. The humiliation was so public, right there, in the very living room that had once been the beating heart of our family, where we had celebrated birthdays, shared Christmases, comforted each other in times of sorrow. Now it was a stage for my public dismissal. There were no shouts from me, no arguments, no tears, not in front of them. Just the crushing weight of those words, and his eyes, his look of pure contempt. I didn't cry. I couldn't, not then. I just nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible nod. My hands, which barely trembled, carefully put the picture frame back in its place on the mantelpiece, aligning it just so. A tiny, almost automatic act of order in a world that had suddenly gone chaotic. I turned, without another word, without meeting his gaze, without looking at Bethany, who still stood like a statue. I walked away. I walked to my bedroom, my legs feeling heavy. each step a deliberate effort. I closed the door behind me, not with a slam, not with anger, but with a quiet click. And in that sudden, engulfing silence, the only thing I could hear, truly hear, was the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. A frantic, desperate rhythm that seemed to fill the whole room. The security I had felt in that house, the feeling of safety, of belonging, it had shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces all around me. They no longer saw me as a mother, not my son, not his wife. I was just an obstacle, an old piece of furniture they wanted to remove to make more space, to make room for their plans. And I was in their way. Locked in my room, the quiet click of the door echoing the finality of their words. The tears finally came. They weren't just soft, gentle tears of sorrow. No, these were hot, stinging tears that burned my cheeks. Tears born from a deep, profound disappointment. Disappointment in my son. Disappointment in Bethany. Disappointment in myself for believing. The image of David, my own flesh and blood, standing there, treating me like an intruder in my own home. It wouldn't leave my mind. It played over and over, a cruel loop, an old piece of furniture, a burden. My heart ached, a deep, hollow ache that felt like a hole had been torn right through me. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I thought about going back out there, to knock on their door, to confront them, to argue, to beg for a little consideration, a scrap of the love they once showed, to plead with them, remind them of everything I had done, everything Arthur and I had built, to tell them how much it hurt, how wrong they were, to demand respect. But then something else took over, a quieter voice. The seamstress within me, you see, she's always been about patience, about precision, about knowing that a rushed stitch will always unravel, that a knot tied in anger will only tighten and break the thread. Anger doesn't stitch good futures. It never has. And revenge? It's a bitter fabric that wears thin quickly. I knew this in my bones. So instead of despair, instead of confrontation, a calm, chilling thought began to form. A strategic thought. I got up from the edge of my bed. My legs still felt heavy, but there was a new resolve in them. I walked over to my old wardrobe, the one Arthur had built for me, the same one that held the old wooden box. My hands went to the familiar latch, the wood smooth under my touch. I opened the box, and there it was, nestled among yellowed letters and faded photographs, lay the deed. The very paper Arthur and I had signed with so much hope and so many dreams, over 40 years ago. My hands trembled as I carefully picked it up, feeling the crispness of the old paper, seeing our names, Eleanor and Arthur. This house is your security, Eleanor. His voice, clear as a bell, it seemed to whisper in my ear, almost as if he were right there beside me. My Arthur, always looking out for me, always thinking ahead. In that moment, the raw pain, the humiliation, it didn't vanish, but it gave way to something else entirely. A chilling clarity, a stark, undeniable truth. David and Bethany hadn't forgotten the house was mine. Not exactly. They simply never knew. Or perhaps they thought that because I was old, because I was a burden, my rights, my ownership simply no longer mattered. That the law, that documents, that promises somehow just dissolved with age. They believed I was fragile, forgotten, and therefore easily dismissed. They thought my claim to this house was as faded as my wedding photographs, but it wasn't. It was as real and as strong as the day Arthur and I signed it. I decided right then, there would be no fight from me, no shouting matches, no tears, no begging, and certainly no revenge. Revenge was for small minds. There would only be the truth, my right. I picked up my cell phone. It felt like a heavy thing in my hand, but also like a powerful one. I looked up the number. Frank Miller, a real estate agent, an old acquaintance from the neighborhood. He'd helped Arthur with some land deals back in the day. A good, honest man, I remembered. He'd always been fair. I dialed the number. My voice, when I spoke, surprised even me. It came out firm, steady. There was no trace of tears, no tremor of fear. "Frank, it's Eleanor Miller, Arthur's wife." I paused, letting him connect the name. "I need your help with something. I need to sell my house, and I'm in a hurry." I explained the situation simply, directly. No dramatics, no emotional outbursts. Just the facts. My son and his wife had given me a deadline, 6 days to leave, a cold ultimatum. I didn't elaborate on their cruelty, didn't paint myself as a victim. That wasn't the point. The point was the deadline, and I was going to comply. Oh yes, I was going to leave. But I was going to do it entirely on my terms, not theirs. The conversation was brief, professional. Frank understood the urgency. He said he'd be in touch, that he'd start looking immediately. I hung up the phone. A quiet calm settled over me, while David and Bethany continued their lives in the rest of the house, planning my supposed eviction, discussing what they would do with my room. I began my own quiet preparations. I didn't pack clothes, not yet. I started with my memories, the small, precious things. The little porcelain bird Arthur gave me on our first anniversary, my favorite thimble, the embroidered handkerchief my mother made. Each item carefully, silently, placed into a box. I had 6 days. They thought they were counting down to my defeat. They were wrong. I was counting down to my freedom. I hung up the phone. A quiet calm settled over me. The embroidered handkerchief my mother made, each item carefully, silently, placed into a box. I had 6 days. They thought they were counting down to my defeat. They were wrong. I was counting down to my freedom. The next 6 days were a test, not for my strength, not for my resolve, but for my soul. It felt like living in a cold, quiet war. David and Bethany acted as if I simply no longer existed. They moved around me, through the house, as if I were a ghost. My presence didn't seem to register. They wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak directly to me, but they talked about me. Oh, they talked about me, right there in front of me, as if I were deaf, as if I couldn't hear every cutting word, every dismissive comment. I remember sitting in the kitchen, eating a simple piece of bread with butter. It was dinner time, but they had their own takeout again in the living room. I heard Bethany's voice, clear and cold, drifting from around the corner. "What are we going to do with her room?" she asked David, a hint of excitement in her tone. "We could turn it into an office, or maybe a workout space." David mumbled something in reply, something about needing more room. Their voices were low, but I heard them. Every single word. They were already dividing up my space, my home, before I was even gone. One morning, I found a flyer on my bed, not a gentle suggestion, but just left there, on my pillow. It was for a nursing home, a cheap one. The pictures showed stark white walls, shared rooms, and a common area that looked more like a human storage facility than a home. It was meant to scare me, to show me my supposed future, to rush me into whatever decision they wanted me to make. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in the trash. No comment, no reaction. Each day was a new stab at my heart, small. Sharp stabs designed to chip away at my spirit. They stopped cleaning the common areas that I used. The kitchen counter where I prepared my tea would be left with crumbs. The bathroom I shared with them would remain untidy. It wasn't about the mess, it was about the message. A silent campaign to make me feel unwelcome, to make the house so uncomfortable that I would practically run out the door. They also stopped buying the little things I liked, the sweet apples I preferred, the specific tea bags I drank. It was a calculated, deliberate effort to erase me from their daily lives, to push me out, to rush me into making a decision that would favor them. I remained quiet through it all. My face showed nothing. I spent most of my time in my room, hidden away. But I wasn't idle. While they thought I was despairing, giving up, I was making discreet calls. Quiet conversations on the phone, away from their hearing. And I was packing. Not my clothes, no. My clothes didn't matter as much. I packed my most precious memories. The photo albums, my grandmother's shawl, Arthur's old pipe, carefully wrapped. Each item a piece of my life, a piece of who I was. These were the things that truly mattered. The loneliness was suffocating, thick like a heavy blanket. David had always been good about letting me see my grandchildren. But now, he suddenly said I wasn't doing very well to receive them. He told them over the phone that Grandma Eleanor was feeling a bit poorly, and it was better if they didn't visit just yet. He was isolating me, cutting me off from the rest of my family, from the only connections I still had. He was making sure no one could interfere with his plans. No one could see what they were doing. No one could offer me help or shelter. He wanted me completely alone, completely vulnerable. The pain, the quiet, persistent pain, peaked on the eve of the deadline, the night before their ultimatum was due. I was in my room, pretending to be asleep, but I heard David talking on the phone in the living room. He thought I was out cold. His voice was low, but I could make out the words. He was talking to Bethany. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice confident, almost triumphant. "Tomorrow, the problem will be solved. We'll finally have the house all to ourselves." I lay there, still as stone, listening to the silence after his words. Little did he know how true that sentence was. The problem would indeed be solved, and they would indeed have the house all to themselves, just not in the way he thought. Little did he know how true that sentence was. The next morning, the sixth day, dawned bright and clear. It was a beautiful day, almost mocking in its serenity. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a quiet, steady thrum of anticipation. I had woken early before David or Bethany stirred. I put on my best dress, a soft blue one that Arthur always liked, and pinned my mother's brooch to the collar. I combed my hair carefully, the way I used to when I was younger, preparing for a special occasion. Today was a special occasion. It was the day I took back my life. I sat in my room, waiting. The house was quiet, still. I could hear the faint sounds of David and Bethany waking, moving about in their own rooms, probably planning their day, planning my departure. They thought they had won. They thought I was beaten. Precisely at 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. A crisp, clear sound that cut through the silence of the house. I heard David's footsteps, hurried, curious. He opened the door, and I imagined his face, probably expecting someone from a moving company, maybe a charity collecting old furniture, or perhaps even a nurse from that terrible home they'd suggested. Something simple, something they controlled. Instead, a ripple of confusion. I could hear the murmur of voices from the living room. David's surprised tone awaited a moment, letting the scene unfold just outside my door. Then, I walked out, slowly, deliberately. My steps were firm, steady. I stood in the doorway of the living room. David was there, holding the door open, and in front of him stood a well-dressed couple, a woman in a smart suit, a man with kind eyes, and beside them, a familiar face, a man in a crisp business suit. Frank Miller, the real estate agent. "Can I help you?" David asked them, his voice laced with confusion. He looked at the couple, then at Frank, then back at me, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if I had somehow conjured them. I stepped fully into the room. My gaze met David's, then Bethany's. Bethany had appeared silent as usual, right behind David, her face mirroring his bewilderment. "You can let them in, my son," I said. My voice was calm, so calm, without a tremor. I couldn't believe how steady it was. "They've come to see the house." David's mouth opened slightly. Bethany's eyes widened. They exchanged a quick, incredulous look. I could see the thought forming in their minds. Old woman, delusional. She's finally lost it. Their expressions were priceless, a mix of pity and utter disbelief. That's when Frank Miller stepped forward, a polite, professional smile on his face. He extended a hand to David. "Mr. David, your mother, Miss Eleanor, hired us to sell the property." The air in the room seemed to thicken. David stiffened. Bethany gasped, a small, choked sound. Their faces, just moments before filled with condescending amusement, now drained of all color. They looked at each other, then back at me, searching for a trick, a joke. But my face remained serene. I walked past David, past the stunned couple, and over to the coffee table. My hands, which had trembled earlier that morning, were now perfectly steady. I opened my purse. Slowly, deliberately, I took out the house deed. The same one Arthur and I had signed, the one I had kept safe in my wooden box. I placed it on the polished wood of the coffee table. The paper, ancient and official, lay there, undeniable. Then, next to it, I placed another document, a sales contract. It was already signed by me, and signed by the couple who stood there, now patiently waiting. They were the new owners. I looked at David, really looked at him. His eyes were darting from the deed to the contract, then to my face, then to Bethany's. His mouth was still slightly open. "You gave me an ultimatum, my son," I said, my voice still calm, almost conversational. It wasn't a whisper, but it wasn't a shout either. Just a clear, unwavering statement of fact. Pay rent or leave. I couldn't pay the rent, so I decided to leave. I paused, letting that sink in. Their eyes were glued to me, their expressions frozen in disbelief. And since the house I would have to leave was mine, I continued, my voice gaining just a touch of quiet strength. I sold it. I gestured to the couple. They are the new owners. Then I turned back to David, looking deep into his eyes. There was no anger there, no desire for vengeance, only a quiet, resolute dignity. You have 30 days to vacate the property, according to the law. That's plenty of time for you to find somewhere else to live. David stumbled backward a step, bumping into Bethany, who was equally stunned. Their faces were a canvas of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. It was my justice, not a cruel justice, but a just one, a quiet reclaiming of what was always mine. It was a good deal, I added softly, picking up my purse. The money will ensure me a peaceful old age. The silence that followed was deafening. They stared at me, their plans, their assumptions, their entire world shattering around them. They thought they had cornered an old woman. They had cornered a property owner. And they had been outplayed. Their faces a mixture of utter disbelief and raw, naked panic was the only revenge I needed. It wasn't about anger or making them suffer. It was about proving my own worth, my own power that I had always held, even when they tried to strip it from me. They had wanted the house for themselves, and now they would have to leave it. And I, Eleanor, was finally free. And I, Eleanor, was finally free. The shock on David and Bethany's faces, that dawning realization of what they had truly lost, it wasn't a moment of triumph for me. Not really. It was just a quiet truth settling in, the dust finally settling. I left them standing there, bewildered, in the house that was no longer theirs, not truly. I walked out, not with a flourish, but with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. With the money from the sale, I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't book a cruise around the world or fancy trips. That wasn't what my heart desired. What I truly wanted was peace and quiet, my own quiet. So I did what felt right. I bought a small, sunlit apartment. Just 2 bedrooms. It's in a quiet neighborhood, just perfect for me, right near a lovely tree-lined park. One room, sunny and bright, is for me. And the other? That's for my sewing machine. And all my bits and pieces, my books, Arthur's old pipe, my memories. It's a space just for me, a creative space. The first thing I did, the very first thing when I moved in, was to put a fern pot on the balcony. A beautiful green, thriving fern. Just like the one I used to have at the old house. A one Bethany had intentionally let die, little by little, by neglecting it. This one, this new fern, it's alive, and it thrives, just like me. My routine now? It's simple, and it's all mine. I wake up with the sun streaming through my window, not to the sound of hurried footsteps and hushed conversations of those who ignored me. No more tiptoeing around, no more listening for sighs or dismissive looks. The silence is not empty anymore. It's peaceful. It's full of my own thoughts, my own plans for the day. I have my breakfast at the corner bakery now. It's a charming little place, and they already call me by name. They know my order. A small coffee and a fresh scone. It's a little thing, but it means so much. To be seen, to be known. And I've gone back to my sewing. Oh, how I missed it. It's not out of obligation now. Not mending clothes for others just to feel useful. It's for pleasure. I make small alterations for my neighbors. Things they need. A hem here, a button there. They come to my door, chat for a bit, and I feel connected, but on my own terms. My hands are busy again, creating, mending, not just broken clothes, but my own spirit. And my grandchildren, they visit me now. They come directly to my little apartment, ringing my doorbell, their faces bright. No more excuses about Grandma Eleanor not doing very well. They come, and I tell them stories. Stories about their Grandpa Arthur, about his strong hands and his kind heart, about how we built our first home, brick by brick. They listen, wide-eyed, fascinated. And I see a part of Arthur, a part of myself, living on in them. It warms my soul. I don't feel hatred for my son, David. It would be easy to, I suppose, after everything. But no, I don't feel hatred. What I feel is a deep sadness, a quiet, profound sadness for the man he became. The boy I raised, the kind boy, he was lost somewhere along the way. He and Bethany, they called me a few times. Their voices were different now, less confident. They asked for forgiveness. They asked for help. I listened, and I forgave them. Because resentment, that's a heavy burden to carry. It only harms the person who holds onto it. It's like carrying hot coals in your hands. You only burn yourself. So I forgave them. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. And it certainly doesn't mean trusting again. My peace today, this quiet, simple life I have, it is priceless. It truly is. I learned the hard way that a woman's greatest asset isn't the house she owns. It's the respect she has for herself, the dignity she carries, and the clarity she finds in her own heart. That's what truly sets her free. The new life I found, it wasn't about the grand gestures or proving anything to David and Bethany. It was about proving something to myself, about remembering who Eleanor was, beyond being a mother, a wife, or a burden. It was about reclaiming the quiet dignity that I thought had been stripped away. I sit here now, sometimes, in my sunlit apartment, with the fern on the balcony swaying gently in the breeze, and I think about it all, not with bitterness, but with a kind of profound understanding. My story, you see, it might sound unique, but in so many ways it isn't. I've come to realize that. It's a story of age, of being seen differently, of having your worth reevaluated by those you love, simply because time has passed. I was a seamstress, always busy, always useful. My hands were always working, creating, mending. I contributed. I built a home. I raised a child. Arthur and I poured our lives into that house. Every brick, every window, every memory. And then, slowly, silently, that contribution was forgotten. My value diminished. I became an inconvenience, an old piece of furniture, a problem to be solved. It's a cruel thing to feel invisible in your own home, with your own family, to hear laughter from the next room and know you're excluded, to have your presence tolerated, not cherished. It's a pain that doesn't leave scars you can see, but it digs deep, right into your soul. It makes you question everything you thought was true about love, about family, about your place in the world. For a long time, I walked on eggshells, trying to be smaller, quieter, less noticeable, just hoping for a scrap of kindness, a moment of recognition. I remember thinking, perhaps it's me. Perhaps I am too old, too slow, too much. But it wasn't me. It was their perception. It was their hurried lives, their focus on what they wanted, which simply didn't include me, or my history, or my needs. It was the way we, as people, sometimes forget the immense value that every human being carries, especially those who have lived long, full lives. We look at age, and sometimes all we see is decline, not wisdom. We see frailty, not resilience. We see a past, not a continuing presence that deserves respect. It's a silent battle often. The battle to remain seen, to remain heard, to remain valued. Many older people face this. They've given so much, built so much, loved so deeply. They carry within them a wealth of stories, experiences, lessons. They are the roots of our families, the threads that connect us to where we came from. And yet, sometimes, those very roots are overlooked, or worse, cut. My experience taught me that pain, as terrible as it is, can sometimes carve out a space for clarity. It showed me that dignity isn't something someone else grants you. It's something you hold on to, even when others try to pry it from your hands. It's about knowing your own worth, even when the world, or even your own son, tries to tell you otherwise. It's about remembering the promises you made to yourself, or the quiet strength passed down from those who loved you. Arthur's words, "This house is your security, Eleanor," they weren't just about a building. They were about my inherent right to safety, to peace, And that feeling of reclaiming my own power, it wasn't about anger. It was about a deep sense of self-respect. It was quiet. It was firm. It was the truth. And the truth, I found, is a powerful thing. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be. I hope that if you ever find yourself in a place where your contributions are overlooked, where your voice feels unheard, you find your own quiet truth. You find that resilience within you. And have you ever felt invisible within your own family? Have your story and contributions been forgotten by those who should honor them most? This reflection is something that I live with now, this understanding. It's not an end to my story, but a new chapter, built on a foundation of dignity and the quiet knowledge that I am enough. I am more than enough. And you? Have you ever felt invisible within your own family? Have your story and contributions been forgotten by those who should honor them most? My story, you see, it might sound unique, but in so many ways, it isn't. I've come to realize that. It's a story of age, of being seen differently, of having your worth reevaluated by those you love, simply because time has passed. I was a seamstress, always busy, always useful. My hands were always working, creating, mending. I contributed. I built a home. I raised a child. Arthur and I poured our lives into that house. Every brick, every window, every memory. And then, slowly, silently, that contribution was forgotten. My value diminished. I became an inconvenience, an old piece of furniture, a problem to be solved. It's a cruel thing to feel invisible in your own home, with your own family, to hear laughter from the next room and know you're excluded, to have your presence tolerated, not cherished. It's a pain that doesn't leave scars you can see, but it digs deep, right into your soul. It makes you question everything you thought was true about love, about family, about your place in the world. For a long time, I walked on eggshells, trying to be smaller, quieter, less noticeable, just hoping for a scrap of kindness, a moment of recognition. I remember thinking, perhaps it's me. Perhaps I am too old, too slow, too much. But it wasn't me. It was their perception. It was their hurried lives, their focus on what they wanted, which simply didn't include me, or my history, or my needs. It was the way we as people sometimes forget the immense value that every human being carries, especially those who have lived long, full lives. We look at age, and sometimes all we see is decline, not wisdom. We see frailty, not resilience. We see a past, not a continuing presence that deserves respect. It's a silent battle, often. The battle to remain seen, to remain heard, to remain valued. Many older people face this. They've given so much, built so much, loved so deeply. They carry within them a wealth of stories, experiences, lessons. They are the roots of our families, the threads that connect us to where we came from. And yet, sometimes those very roots are overlooked, or worse, cut. My experience taught me that pain, as terrible as it is, can sometimes carve out a space for clarity. It showed me that dignity isn't something someone else grants you. It's something you hold on to, even when others try to pry it from your hands. It's about knowing your own worth, even when the world or even your own son tries to tell you otherwise. It's about remembering the promises you made to yourself, or the quiet strength passed down from those who loved you. Arthur's words, "This house is your security, Eleanor," they weren't just about a building. They were about my inherent right to safety, to peace, to a place in this world that was truly mine. and that feeling of reclaiming my own power. It wasn't about anger. It was about a deep... It was firm. It was the truth. And the truth, I found, is a powerful thing. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be. I hope that if you ever find yourself in a place where your contributions are overlooked, where your voice feels unheard, you find your own quiet truth. You find that resilience within you. This reflection is something that I live with now. This understanding. It's not an end to my story, but a new chapter, built on a foundation of dignity and the quiet knowledge that I am enough. I am more than enough. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this one, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you're still subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon.